like protecting intellectual property. And positioning, how best can you position yourself in the target market to differentiate yourself from other competitors? And I'm sure there's lots of other P's, but it just means there's a lot more things to think about when you're looking at the export market. And this is really the point of this slide. So branding. Products are much more easily branded than services. Services, we've talked about this quite a lot, but they're intangible, they're invisible. So your brand and your logo become extra important because it's what people are going to associate your company with. So your brand reflects who you are and who you want to be, who people perceive you to be. It differentiates your company from your competitors. And for services, often your logo is the most important part of your brand. Let's just quickly go. These are service companies. Anybody know what the first one is? Starbucks the second? Rolling Stones, right. Third? Amazon. Good. Taco Bell. Facebook. Yeah. Oh, you're a pro. Look at this. Target. Good. Those are all service companies, and we all, look how fast that was done. Under 30 seconds, we got them all. So they've clearly been really good at their branding and associating their logo with their companies. Now this talks about market positioning. Identify the ideal positioning and determine where time and effort will be spent. So if you look at the first quadrant, that's an existing service in an existing market. And the challenge here will be focus on differentiating from local competition, right? The next one is a new service, but in an existing or similar market. That's going up this way. So you have new service in the same market, right? So what do you need to do? You need to adapt to your customers, to their needs. You need to innovate, you need to improve, you need to focus on quality and pricing. And the third one is a similar similar service, but a new market. So maybe another country in Latin America that might be quite similar. What do you need to do? You need to learn about the market, conduct research and market intelligence, and establish a presence in there. Now this is where we're going to be either here or here, which is a new service in a new market or a similar service in a new market. And for that one, you need to create a dedicated export plan. This is where we're going. Commit time and effort and resources to this. Right? This is a quote that I liked. If you want to go fast, go alone, which is true, but if you want to go far, you go with others. So networking are especially, we've talked about this, but it's especially crucial for service providers where, you know, it's all about who you know and how much trust and credibility you have. So networking skills are important because they create word-of-mouth referrals and create powerful leads. The key purpose of networking is to increase business through the generation of referrals, access to new opportunities, enhanced credibility, as well as access to information. If you're looking for a long-term presence in a market, it's always good to meet the intermediary organizations, which you will be doing, meeting with the accelerators and the Pro-Colombia in the market. Other places, this is for business. As associations, it's always good to join the local association and sector groups. Social networks, these are ways to build your networks. Governments through committees and advisory groups. Have you ever asked somebody what they do and they're like, yeah, social media marketing or something like that? And they just don't really use the opportunity if you're asking them to tell you what you do. I make movies. But they don't really, you know, every time somebody asks you what to do, it's an opportunity to use your business pitch, right? You need to get this done. You need to get this down pat. And this is part of the value proposition exercise that we were just talking about being able to say concisely and very articulately what you do. So the first one is an elevator pitch. Have you ever heard about that? You step into the elevator, the guy's next to you. Hey, so what do you do? And the guy has about 10 floors to tell you what it is he does. So that's maybe 30 seconds. That's you. You have 30 seconds to tell somebody what it is you do. You don't say I make movies or I digital marketing. You try to get a clear, you qualify the prospect. So here's the things: a key question or comment to steer discussion. Hey, what it is that you do? Clear statement about what you do. This is where you use your value proposition. You have 30 seconds now, so you used your well-tweaked value proposition. You qualify your prospect if you have a chance. Are you interested in, what are you doing? What kind of services do you need? You exchange business cards, and then you follow up afterwards. Now, a networking event, we had one yesterday. We have a little more time to ask people more questions, and more importantly, you have a little more time to understand what the other person, their needs are. So you could say the name of the key name and company, key questions to comments to steer discussion. So you might want to ask them what their needs are and start off that way. Clear statement about what you do as it relates to what their needs are. You qualify the prospect. Preliminary needs assessment, example of your service offering, and suggest follow-up. That might be at a networking event. And this is when you have a formal presentation, when you're at a meeting and maybe have 20, 30 minutes to discuss what it is you do. Or if you are, I think this one was tweaked for if you were making a presentation to an audience. You select topics that will demonstrate your expertise, clear statement about what you do. You share useful information so people could see the value. You prompt the audience to contact you for something specific, and you provide your contact details. This is a quick slide, but there's 5 types of networkers. And it's really important that companies send the person who is the best networker to these types of events. So the lone networker, he might have really great ideas, and he may be a really valuable employee, but he's uncomfortable talking to people, and he likes to stay by himself, and they might appear disinterested. You don't want to send that person to a networking event, right? The passive networker is a person that goes to a networking event and talks to all the people they already know. So they talk to their friends and their colleagues, and they network well, but they're not meeting new people. The inquisitive networker is somebody who goes to a networking event and asks a lot of questions, but doesn't contribute a lot of information back. People are uncomfortable with being grilled, and they might, shy away from that. You don't want somebody, you want to give and take. The social networker is somebody who goes to a networking event and might talk about the weather or food or something else, but not get down to the meat of the matter. And the dedicated networker, this is the one that you want to try to be. They help, they introduce others, they give information, they give useful information, they gather information, and they portray a really good image for the company. And this is the type of person that you want to attend your networking events. So preparing for a networking event. Do your research on the event and who's going to be there. We talked about this. If you're going to a conference, there's always a list of attendees available beforehand. Do your research. Get the participant list. Note the key contacts that you want to meet with. Set goals. That's always really important. What do you want to achieve at the end of this networking event? And remember your business cards. During, arrive early, mingle. Don't stay with one person maybe too long. You want to work the room. You ask questions. You listen. You remember names. Sometimes it helps me if I say the name out loud. You share information, but don't really go into lengthy sales pitch. It's not the time. And be a connector. Introduce other people. Appear useful. Be useful. And after, make notes. I like to write on the back of people's business cards, but don't do that in front of people because some people find it disrespectful to write on their back of business cards. But I like to take notes afterwards so I could remember what I've promised that person I would follow up with. Say I promised to send them a presentation, or I promised to send them a report. I would write it down. Follow up. And sending somebody a report is a good way to follow up. Again, you appear that you're sending them useful information. Connect on social media and stay in touch. So you might, I saw this, it made me think of you. Here's another report that I thought you might be interested in. That's a good way of staying in touch, even if things got in a little cold between the two. So networking is a critical business activity. It needs to be taken seriously, especially in the services sector. Now, we've talked about this a lot, but because services are intangible, establishing credibility is very important. There are a few things more important than business than trust. Credibility is defined as the degree to which someone or something is deemed trustworthy and believable. Establishing credibility is a challenge for service providers because you are strangers and you do not know each other. So credibility can't be examined like you can the quality of a product. And credibility is gained through different means for different service providers and different means for different customers. So here are some good ones. Credentials. If you have any certifications in anything, is that noted on your website? Is it noted on your business card? We are all certified international trade professionals, I think. And on our business cards, it says CITP. So you know that we are certified international trade professionals. Testimonials. We'll talk about that in more detail, best practices for testimonials in the next module, 3.2. But it's always good to gather testimonials from your clients, particularly clients that have been especially impressed and you've developed a especially good relationship with. Being a member of an industry association. Now, it's good to be, let's say, a member of the Columbia ICT Association, but if you're exporting to Canada, Canadians don't understand what that means. It's even better if you're a member of the Canadian ICT Association. So think about joining these associations. You have access to people and access to information that way. Networking events, we talked about that. Public speaking appearances. If you want to attend an event, I believe we discussed this in one of the modules as well, it's always good to try to get on the speakers list. It doesn't hurt to write the organizers and say, this is what I do. I'd be willing to deliver a presentation. Because once you have a microphone in hand, people think you're credible, right? Strategic alliances. If you have a partner in the market who is very credible in the market, their credibility rubs off on you because now you're partners with somebody who has a good reputation. Your website. We're going to talk about that in much more detail going forward, but how do you build a credible website? What kind of information do you put on to transmit credibility through that site? And your portfolio, which we will also talk about in 3.2 in a lot more detail, but your portfolio and any client-facing materials is a good way to demonstrate through the work that you've already done your credibility. So in services, it's about building relationships. You only get one chance to make a first impression. So build trust and then talk business. Don't just immediately jump into business, and listen before you talk about your service. When you go into a meeting, you don't start with a pitch. You start with asking the potential customer about their needs. Focus on client needs. Position yourself as wanting to help. Communicate effectively. Exceed expectations. Showcase your credibility. And be sincere and empathetic and personal. Have you ever gone into a business? I know this happens quite often in Barbados, where you go into a business and they don't have what you want, but they will recommend another company that does. That always positions them favorably for me because they were helpful. Even if they couldn't help me personally, they still position themselves as wanting to help me, and I will remember that. Don't assume you're going to get a contract right away. Don't give away too much information. Don't push too hard, especially Canadians. We get really wary of really aggressive sales pitches. Don't forget to understand business culture and how it influences everything from how you discuss in a meeting to what you wear. Don't forget your business cards. Don't forget to take note of non-related business information. So, for example, if they say, my son is graduating from university next week, make a note of that. And then you could, send him a congratulation note to his son. Hey, congratulations. I hope, the ceremony went well. And it's nice to remember these personal touches. Treat a potential customer generically. Nobody likes to be a number, especially in services. They want to know that you're special. Don't send them these mass kind of emails where you don't even, you personalize it with their name, right? Nobody likes to be treated generically. This is a relationship selling wheel. So if you only have 1 hour, let's say this is an example of how a meeting would go. You only have 1 hour. How do you build a relationship? And the first thing is to build rapport, to ask maybe non-related business questions and to just be social with the other person. Then you ask questions, you gather information, and you'll see that this is where the bulk of the meeting should take place, where you're gathering information as much as you can about your customer. And only then do you talk about your service, and you do not talk about your service in a generic way, but you relate back to the information that you've just gathered. You check commitment. What did you think about that? Does that match your needs? And then they say, well, not really, because, or kind of, or but what about this? That's where you handle the objections, and you get commitment from them, at least some kind of tentative, can I send you a proposal? And then, of course, you follow up, and that's the most important, probably, part of this wheel is don't forget to follow up. Now, a lot of people market like this, where you send mass emails out to everybody and hope that something trickles through at the end. Now, that's not the best way to really market, but this is kind of a traditional marketing approach. So you send things out, and maybe you get 1 or 2 prospects, and hopefully a first-time customer, and loyal customer, and a brand advocate. But it takes a lot of work to get to the brand advocate. We're proposing that you flip that upside down. And we've talked a lot about this, about finding your niche and finding your target customer. We've been through this a lot. So write a big list of your ideal customer and your ideal companies. And from there, identify who are the decision makers in the company, who are the influencers of this company. It says account-based marketing theory is based on the premise that B2B buying, business-to-business buying decisions are not made by a single person. You probably know that within your own company, that if you're making an important purchasing decision, it goes through many people's hands before the service is actually purchased. So engage with these contracts. Greg mentioned kind of following people on LinkedIn and watching what it is they do. So engage with them. Try to, if they've posted something on LinkedIn and comment on it, reach out through the website or follow them on social media, and look for the opportunity to make contact and engage with them in a meaningful way. And then hopefully eventually you could turn your target customers, these key customers, into clients or partners and advocates. So we're going to talk about some of the non-digital marketing materials here. And business cards, and this is one, because I work in services, I always examine people's business cards, maybe more than the average person. Go world class. Make sure it's printed professionally and not on a photocopier, and you'll be surprised at how many people print their business cards on a photocopying machine, maybe with like harder stock paper, but it's still in a photocopy and it's not even cut properly. Don't do that. Include an area code, because sometimes I get back and if the area code in the country aren't on the card, I travel a lot. I don't remember where I've gotten this card from. Include a line about what you do. So if it says TS Associates, and that's it. I don't know if they're a funeral home or if they're a florist or if they're a legal firm or an accounting firm, and I have no idea what it is. So make sure that you include some line on your card that gives an indication as to what it is you do. If you're targeting a non-Spanish speaking country or a non-English speaking country, consider a bilingual card, or use icons instead of words so that they're in no specific language. Don't forget to use the back of your card. That's key real estate as well. So don't leave that empty. Don't leave that blank. Don't forget to bring your cards. I mean, that's a clear one. You never know where you're going to meet somebody, so have them on you at all times, even if you're going to the beach. This is more important in some sectors than others, but it will come into play in at least the IT sector, definitely. We've been asked in the past about CVs for people we've trained. Make sure that you have a CV professionally formatted, concise, and error-free. Get the basics right. So education, qualifications, work experience, and references at the bottom too are useful. Format. You should be able to, I have 2 CVs. I have kind of a US style CV, which looks really nice. And then I have a EU CV, which is used in consulting, and it's a templated format that all consultants have this kind of formatted. It's a very specific template for it. Be consistent. So ensure that the branding of your CV is consistent with other branding materials. And it's always useful to have a biography in your pocket. You never know when you might need to pull it out, tweak that one as well. I've looked at lots of CVs in some of my positions, and you'll be surprised at how many CVs I received without contact details, because they email them to me and the contact details are clearly in the email, but I might have to pull out that CV for one reason or another and put it in a folder. And then I'm not matching it back up with the email. That's a lot of work if I've pulled it out. So make sure your contact details, that sounds really obvious. You'll be surprised how many CVs I've seen that don't have contact details on it. So these are must-have marketing materials: is business cards, website, a social media presence of some kind or another, project portfolio. We're going to talk about these, and testimonials and references. We're going to talk about these as well. These are good to have: media kits, explainer and promo videos, and brochures. Now, we're going to be working on our profile for this project, which is the company profile. I'm going to pull up the template. Give me 1 second here.
Yeah, actually, I don't have it. Oh, okay. How's everyone? Good? Good morning. I haven't seen all of you yet. So this next part is really important, okay? The company profile, and this is something that's quite unique that we do for this program, and it is the key tool that we're going to use to put up on the ProColumbia website a company profile for all of your companies, okay? And for the advisors who are here, we're going to ask for your assistance. This is going to be a top priority in the coming days, because the sooner we can get the company profiles up, the better we have an opportunity to get to know who you really are and can start sharing with the selected Canadian contacts, okay? I wish I'd remembered to bring one because I had a sample, but it's basically an 8.5 by 11 page in color with standard information, and Michelle will, this is a sample that was done for Global Links, our company. And we're going to take you through a step-by-step process for completing it. Now, it's really, really important that it be very well done. This is your showpiece. So everything that we've been talking about, the value proposition, the company description, differentiating what it is that you do, will be very important, and especially having very, very good English. So, try to get it to the point that you can. Maybe your advisor can help from there. So company does the work first using this template. Then after the company has completed their work, they will send it on to the advisor, who will review and try to fine-tune if required. And then from there, it'll come in centrally to Camilo's group for another review. Then it comes to us for a final review. And we want to make that happen very fast. Okay? Yes?
I have a quick question.
Yes?
How important is for the companies attending today's program to have this presentation in, I would say, Canadian English rather than American? For instance, neighbor with the U instead of only, or favorable, those type of words. I mean, is it possible to have it in American, that is the most standard English that we know, or should we customize it? What do you suggest?
Yes.
Yes?
Have it in Canadian English.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, it's easy to do. There aren't that many words. Favorable, color. There aren't that many. We'll be watching for that. Center, instead of C-E-N-T-E-R, it's R-E. And, it may be noticeable. Now, Canadian companies work with a lot of American companies, too. So we go back and forth from one to the other. But you really want to be seen as being Canadian. Everything from the words to your personality, okay? There are some differences, okay? Good. I'll turn it over to Michelle. So again, this is really key, and we're going to ask for some quick work on this, and we'll be sending emails and prompting you, and Michelle will take you through the process.
Good. So like Diane said, this is the first exercise that everybody's going to turn in, and we're going to set a deadline very close to today. So the first thing, if you see this profile, it's the name of the company at the top. I should keep flipping back to this. But the name of the company and the type of company, it's 3-4 words. So you'll see here for this one, we have an export acceleration program. So we need 3 or 4 words that describe your company. We have some examples: software development, digital marketing, graphics animation. It's more just a title here. The second one is describe the services you offer. So it's a company description. It doesn't need to be long. Oops. Yeah, it doesn't need to be long, about 80 words. This is our offer. It's your value proposition. So you're already working on it. Here's some examples of other companies that we've worked in the past. You want to have basically your kind of extended value proposition. Greg mentioned value proposition with the second paragraph. That might be what goes in here. Your clients, you list your key clients or maybe even key projects you've worked in this section. Maximum 50 words. It's only 1 page, remember. We're going to change the format. You saw it was a vertical format. We're going to change it into a horizontal format, but there's not a lot of real estate on that page. So you need to be very careful on how you select the words to maximize on the real estate. Now your trainer will be working alongside of you, and we'll do the final tweaking as well, make sure that everything is okay. But it's ultimately up to you to propose the content in this. Now profile, that was at the very start. Let me flip quickly back through that. You see the profile at the top. It's the year established, number of employees, the annual exports as a percentage. So I export 50% of my sales, and the market served. Now this is, let me show you again, quickly flip back. See services on the right-hand side there. It's basically a heading, and then a few words to describe that heading, right? Not a lot of words. Again, we only want maybe 3 or 4, maybe maximum 5 services listed here. If it doesn't fit, we have to cut it back, so don't make it too long. Your objectives. What is your objective regarding the Canadian market, and specifically not just the Canadian market, but also this project? And this will help people, potential clients or potential partners, recognize themselves in your objective. So again, be thoughtful. And your contact information. And this is the person who is going to be on the Canadian mission or receiving the Canadian companies when they come back to Colombia, right? So we need name, title, telephone number, mobile number, email, and the company website address. At the top, these are some of the images that we need. Now we need a banner image. I'm not sure if it's going to look like this, but we need a banner image that represents what your company does. These are some examples. Well chosen, because you see sometimes, like, look at this one, double digit. A lot of people's heads are getting cut off, and a lot of people's faces are getting cut off. So choose wisely which ones you use there that can fall in where there will be pieces on top. I'll share the template with you before maybe I put it in, so you have a better understanding of where the boxes will fall. And also here you'll see on the front page, I need the banner image, which I just showed you. I need a photograph of the person who will be the representative. And I need a good quality logo that preferably has been designed for a white background. And we'll speak to Mariana and Camilo about the deadline, but let's just tentatively say next week, Friday. Yeah? At the latest. Is that okay, Diane? She's kind of looking at me and says, that's kind of late. Yeah. Okay. Yes, everybody should have this on their websites already. I mean, this is not new. Surely everybody has short descriptions of their companies available, and they have a client list available. None of this information is really novel. I guess the biggest challenge will be to extract that information and to tighten it for the word limits. Does everybody have access to the Dropbox folder where all the presentations were yesterday? Does everybody have the link from Mariana? If you don't, lift up your hand. Okay, so a few people don't. Have you had the opportunity to check your email? Yes. Okay. So, well, make sure that Mariana maybe resends that, or make sure that everybody's been on that list. But you'll see that there's a Dropbox folder, and there's 3 subfolders. One are for the presentations in English, one are for the presentation, and that's complete. One is for the presentations in Spanish, which is at the moment incomplete, and then one is for the exercises. And in the exercises folder, you'll find all of the templates that we've shared with you, which is the export plan template, the value proposition template, and also this company profile template, just as you see it here with this PowerPoint presentation. Right? Okay. Good. So we'll send instructions in the next couple of days on how to go about this. Feel free to start in advance if you do have access to the Dropbox folder. Feel free to start filling this out. And as Diane said, this is what all the Canadians will read. We'll have a package of 27 of these, and this is what the Canadian companies will be looking at. So it's going to be probably your first interface with the Canadian companies. Before they even get to your website, this is what they're getting to. And what do we talk about first appearances? You only get one chance to make a first impression, right? This is your first. Is that pressure? Okay, Greg is back to finish off the value proposition exercise and to see what everybody came up with.
All right. I think you're starting to understand why we're working on the value proposition. Because as you can see, we're going to take that as content, and it's going to feed into a lot of different things that are going to start helping us at Gateway as well as ProColombia to start to market the companies that might be coming up into the Canadian market. So it is very critical that, sure, you could go to your website now, cut and paste, and that's your company description. But now that you've been through this and you're thinking about your value statements, this gives you an opportunity to potentially start tweaking and updating a little bit. If you do have to redo the whole website, well, better get started quickly. And then it gives you the ability to incorporate that into the upgrades that you're going to do on the messaging. So let's just close off on the value statements. And I need volunteers. I need proud, fearless volunteers to stand up and deliver your value statement in English. Anybody? Guess I'll choose you. No, just stand up and use the microphone.
Okay. Canadian broadcasters and production companies looking for factual content applicable for the Canadian market that will benefit from explorers' experience in producing documentaries that impact, compel, and engage audiences.
I'm not going to go into an English lesson at all. Obviously, in every language, you can flip as well to be passive or active. I'm a guy that likes active because it's very direct. You know, my company does this, that does this for clients. But I like the way you did it because you're a very creative company, and the way that you've described it is it flows nicely, and it flows in a way that actually, you know, it forces them to read the whole thing or to listen to the whole thing, but it sounds nice. So very well done. That's very good. All right, next. All right. And then I've got you on third.
Our company, Green's QA, we're looking for industrial and services companies in Canada who gets directly to their final customer and be concerned about the quality of their services. Our services, software testing and automation testing, to help them to ensure that their IT solution meets their and final customers' needs and expectations. Okay.
That's good. I'm going to say that that is long. So what you're going to want to do is to see where you can carve out the bits and pieces. In English, we call them superfluous words or unnecessary additive words that when you're talking to somebody, it would make you sound silly, but when you're reading it as a headline, you understand it and it makes sense. So sometimes you'll see these in ads where it says best product ever. What we're not saying is the best product ever found. We're just saying best product ever. What you need to do is you need to take your pitch, especially if you have a complicated solution, and find a way to cut out as many words as you can to make it drive. And then you extend it when you're in a personal discussion or you know that you have the time and you've got somebody's attention.
Okay. We are looking for production and distributors companies of kids content in Canada that are interested in co-develop and co-produce original and unique TV animated kids content to create, develop, and produce high-quality animated content for kids that help them to expand their catalog with fresh and new shows.
That's good. So, and excellent. And again, one thing to think about is, because we keep talking about, use the same words, you don't want to say kids shows or kids contents more than twice. So what you do is you look for alternative words. Youth programming, programming for children, programming for families, and then that way you can say it over and over again, but it's using a different descriptor, a different noun, or a different adjective. So if we can find a way to use adjectives that you don't repeat more than twice in any particular pitch is good. And there's lots of English adjectives that mean the same thing and do the same thing, just like in Espanol. All right, well, thank you very much. That's the brave people standing up, thank you. And everybody else, you're going to have to do this. So at some point, Theo and I are going to say, all right, give it to us, and then we'll just continue to work through it. Be patient with us, because there's always a refining process that's just going to keep going over and over again. Think about this for the profiles, because they're coming up. That deadline comes up really fast. We don't need perfection, but what we do need is the content, because it's going to take a while to produce those profiles. And they're so critical that you're going to want to spend some time and do an awful lot of work on them. All right, so now we have the elements of a marketing plan. We know what it is that we're going to have to build out. We know the tools that we're going to have to build out. And we know kind of where we need to start in the value statements and pitching what we do and explaining what we do to our clients. So in this particular module, we go really granular. And we're going to go specifically into web-based marketing, because let's face it, in this room, I think 99% of us are going to be doing our marketing and explaining what we do and showing what we do either on a mobile phone, in some type of animation, or on a website. And the website use in Canada is so critical that we've created this module specifically for it, because Canadians consider content on the web to be the #1 source for information for anything that you do. This is also a hard module for Theo and I to do, because here we are telling digital marketing companies how to do digital marketing and how to do it better. And sometimes it's a bit audacious, but we're going to do it anyway because we're crazy that way. So in this particular module, we're going to talk an awful lot about websites, what you need, what doesn't work, how do Canadians use websites, and how are they going to find out information about you. We're going to talk a lot about messaging, mission statements, and then we're going to get into something that's probably incredibly the key thing you're going to need: portfolios. You need to have a collection of incredible artwork, films, portfolios, pieces that are going to be usable in a way to capture somebody's imagination. Why? Because we're in the creative industry here. And it's not going to be enough just to do up a nice flyer and hand it to somebody. We're going to have to actually wow them and get their attention. As Bill Gates said, even I think this is 15 years ago, that if your business is not on the internet, then you're basically not going to be in business. So in Canada, this is an extremely accurate quote, because Canadians are the #1 users of the internet in the world per capita. We just beat out South Korea 2 years ago. So we're also the #1 country in the world per capita in the number of pages on a website that we check out. So we don't just visit more websites, we actually go through the websites more than anyone else in the world. So it's not your front page that you also have to worry about. You have to worry about everything that's on your website, because Canadians and Canadian businesses have a habit of going through the whole website to try to figure out what you're all about. The simpler you make it, the more dynamic you make it, the more interactive you make it. Canadians love that, because that's what we expect. Well over 50% of all Canadian businesses that receive some type of a communication from you will be viewing you on a mobile phone. In fact, we think that's going to go to 65 or 70%. There was an interesting statistic that consumers in Canada 75% of them are in a grocery store. They will go online on a mobile phone to check out the price at a competitor's store. Standing in the aisle trying to figure out whether or not they can get the cereal cheaper at another store. That's what Canadians do. We have an enormous appetite for consuming content on the internet. And ironically, we have some of the highest internet costs and the highest mobility costs in the world. So we enjoy paying more to go online, and yet we still do it. So that's something to always keep in mind here is that the expectation is there that you have a mobile view and that it's dynamic and it's easy to understand and it's critical. So step one, if you don't have a mobile view that's going to knock some socks off of a Canadian businessman, start thinking about that now, because we all know that that's not just something we can switch on tomorrow. It is going to take some work. In the creative, if that's in a mobile view and it's just showing off your reel or your, the various animations you've done, that's actually a little bit easier because at least it's visual and it's quick to understand. Your value statement then has to somehow be in that mobile view. They're not just going to look at a picture of an animation because they might think you're an actual TV show or that you're selling something totally different. So the value statement has to be there somewhere. We do this for these types of clients. But in mobility view, we're just crafting it in a much tighter way. We have, I think it's now 90% of all Canadians have at least one mobile phone. A lot of us have two. I think my kids have one now. And I waited until grade 6 before I got them a mobile phone. I refused to do anything before that. But boy, they spend a lot of time on those mobile phones. It used to be that we would take the home phone and then the kids would take it all the way up into their bedrooms and then they'd be on the phone for about 20 or 25 minutes. Now it's FaceTime with their best friends at school. The SME community expects information to be easily accessible. That doesn't mean that they adopt technology quickly. I will fully admit small companies in Canada are a bit slower, mostly because they don't want to pay for it, but it's expensive to run a website in Canada because the hosting fees and the internet costs in Canada are very high. But having said that, they expect you to be putting something in front of them that is digital. They will appreciate unique ideas like, these printed flyers that can be folded into origami or things. Clever ideas are remembered, but fundamentally the website and the web presence is going to be where they get that information. So the statistic that I did in a research survey that was about 8 years ago was that you have 7 seconds to impress somebody and convince them that they want to go further into your website or click somewhere on your page in order to learn more about you. 7 seconds. So you think about that for a minute. Hit the website. We're a management consulting company that helps companies go into international markets. That was 7 seconds. So how do I do this visually? And that's going to be something that I think that you need to start looking at because you're in the creative industries. Visual is 10 times more effective than text. If you can find a picture that essentially explains what you do, but it's a visual image, then you are way out ahead of a lot of other people because it's rare when we can actually do that in the ICT world. I'm a coder. How do I take a picture of somebody coding faster than other coders? That's hard to do. But in creative, you have a fantastic opportunity to take your absolute best work, and that's the first thing that someone sees. Good news. If they like it and that's what they're looking for, they're in. They don't even, 7 seconds, nothing. You're in 2 seconds, you've convinced them whether or not they're going to work with you. Bad news is if they're not looking for that type of animation, you have to hope that they're going to look at the reel and understand what else that you do. But it's still worth doing. If you capture their attention and they go, wow, with one image, and they don't even have to read the text, you're a lot further ahead, okay? So let's talk about language. I just talked a little bit about images. Hard to do in some industries, but it certainly is something that you want to aim for. If you can take your value statement and bring it down to one word, then use that word to find an image. That's an exercise that I typically take most companies through. Sometimes you get to the point where there is no image, and you just have to rely on colors or different types of imagery that at least conveys what it is that you're trying to do. But you'd be surprised at what you can come up with and the types of images that you can use. The language has to be clear. I do suggest using what we call first person or direct. I do this for you. If you're passive, it ends up being seen as just a little bit more artistic. Now, if that's what you want to achieve, artistic is fine. There's no bad or good or wrong. But being direct, at least for the first impression, it tells them what you do and is it applicable to me. That's what we want to get to in 7 seconds. All right? I will tell you point blank that 95% of all Canadian businesses will not work with you if they see a massive spelling mistake or an error on the landing page or anything that just looks completely out of place. You will be put into the second bucket, and then they will move on and try to find somebody in the first bucket. We're just a little bit obsessed about that sort of a thing, and I think it's the British background in us, but we need it to be tight and clean. There are different levels of translation, and I've run into this a lot in about 30 different countries now, and I've even worked with companies from New Zealand and from Australia that also have challenges in this space selling into the Canadian market with messaging. The reality is that we start at the bottom with Google Translate. That's usually how an awful lot of people at least can translate a website. And as good as Google says it is, you're nowhere near the standard that you require on this. What this is helpful for is to do research and to make sure that when you hit that page, it translates. At least you can read some of the stuff and you know what it is that you're learning. But Google Translate is not acceptable standard in the Canadian business. It's embarrassing sometimes to see the mistakes. Then what happens is that you'll have somebody that studied in Canada and then they came back to Colombia and they might be working in the marketing department. English is great. They lived there for a year and a half. But that's not necessarily at a level that's going to be high enough. It's a starting point, but it usually, unfortunately, has nuances and phrases that just aren't going to be seen as correct. Professional translation, non-industry. So you have a government translator that has translated lots of different documents before, and they just translate your particular website. Why is that dangerous for a creative industry? It's because they're using words that aren't part of your industry. And even worse, now Canadians are looking at it going, what's that word? It's hard enough trying to explain the digital content animation industry in general and what you do. Now on top of it, you're going to use words that nobody understands. I hate to say this, but you have to invest. You have to find a Spanish-English translator that is in your industry that can help you not just translate, but create the phrase, create the content that actually is cool marketing content. You have to do this because that in your value statement is what's going to be impactful. So invest the time, invest the money, because this is the only one that's going to have that initial 7 seconds that goes, hey, wow, that's great. Now, you can bring it to somebody like this and say, is this a good way to write it? If you've already done it, and that's fine. But if you're starting from the beginning and you're doing translation and you're not comfortable with English, this is where you need to be so that Canadian companies will know they're dealing with somebody that understands and speaks the same language as they do in Canada that gets me. And that's why that's important. And I can't tell you how many times hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of companies are here, or they say, oh, I got it professionally translated, but it wasn't in their industry. And then we lose a couple of words, and then you got an audience full of 200 people you're selling to, and they go, huh? What was that? In German, it's even worse. I swear they just make up words just for fun. So, as we've already gone through, avoiding the puff statements, avoiding the, we help fulfill your dreams type of a concept, as tight and as direct as possible. And the more marketing you are, although in the creative industry this isn't a bad thing, but the more fluff you are, the less credibility you have in many industries in Canada. Creative, if you're crazy and it's outrageous and it's beautiful imagery and an animation and things like that, that actually can help you. Just understand that there may be people there that aren't looking at the creative. They're trying to figure out how to get a hold of you, where you're from or what you're doing, or what your portfolio looks like, because they're just doing an assessment. So that always has to be there. That content has to be there. But if you are good at a particular type of animation that gets people's attention, that has to be up front. Definitely do that. Colombia or not to Colombia? So that basically means that your value statement says, we are a digital animation company from Colombia that sells services, da, 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 da. When do you wave the flag? When do you do things like that? The answer is, it probably won't make that much of a difference in the Canadian market. if you're telling them that you're from Colombia. They want to know, are you capable of delivering the service? Can you deliver it well? And it's going to solve my problems? And is it going to be cost effective? And should I work with you? The fact that you're from Colombia will come up in the conversation eventually, because then you're going to talk about the value of time zone. You're going to talk about the nearness to market factor and the companies you've worked with in the US and Canada before. So it will come up in the conversation. What we're saying here is, do you use it in your marketing materials? If you have something that is very unique that speaks to Colombian culture, that would probably be the only time that I would say that's part of your initial pitch. Other than that, you're trying to convince them that you are a digital animation company with a 3D specialty that, you know, delivers these to TV shows around the world. And then you're going to step back in the second or third paragraph when you're talking with a drink in your hand saying, Colombia's gorgeous, we do this, it's wonderful, Cartagena, you need to go there. And that's where that's going to come out. Time zone is very valuable, but don't forget that there are 12 other markets that claim the same thing, selling outsourced services into the North American market. So it's important and it's very valuable, and you will always beat those guys in India or those guys in Eastern Europe, because I've been through that before and it's painful. It's incredibly painful. So you do have that value, and yes, you have to say that value and pitch that value, but it is not the only thing that you're going to win on. It's just a nice to have, all right? Because they will have gotten pitches from other countries and outsourced providers in Latin America where they've already kind of put that right up at the top, saying, well, we're in the same time zone. Yeah, but what do you do? What's your value? How are you going to help me? That's what they really want to learn. So, search engine optimization. So, has anybody put British spelling into their meta tags in their website? That's one thing to think about. So, let's get on to that British English. Diane's right. It doesn't really matter. American spelling is going to be fine. But the more you craft your personalized message to that perfect client in Toronto that needs a solution that helps him get noticed in Toronto by his customers, that's where this starts to play. Because they will notice that you've spelled center with an ER rather than an RE, and that's what Americans do. And that's when you're skirting the edge of, do they really know me? Because if that client shows his customer an American spelled text, his customer's going to go, wait, I thought we were in Canada. I thought that bank was Canadian. And that's where you get into the problem. So I always like to say, listen, if it's specific to a Canadian client and it's very directed to that perfect customer, take the time to do the British spelling. There's 100 words maybe, tops, where it's actually different. It's not like we have invented a lot of special words in Canada, and you'll get to know what those are. Does anybody know what a double-double is? Anybody? Okay, that's a coffee with 2 cream in it. You order it at Tim Hortons. 2 creams, 2 sugars. Oh, sorry. Even I don't know what it is. I drink my coffee negro. It's I don't know what 2 creams and 2 sugars is. So that's just an example, though, of kind of, if it's necessary for your client, and then if the client has to use that content to sell it to their customers, you really want to start thinking in terms of writing Canadian and spelling in Canadian. So this statistic is one that I actually got from the head of the Procurement Association of Canada, or something like that. 90% of procurement or project managers looking for specific services use Google. It used to be that they'll go to an association, or they'd go to ProColombia, or they try to find a slightly roundabout way of finding out more. The reality is that they're all going to find you on Google. So optimize, optimize, optimize. Make sure that you are doubling up and tripling up on the content to make sure that you get found, and make sure that Canadian companies can find you, because that's what Canadian companies do. We go on the internet, we find you in Google, or we search on the internet, and then we review websites and we read a lot of the pages of the websites. Create that Canadian-based vocabulary. Add that in. Make sure you've added it in. It's not a lot of work. You're just tossing in a couple of variations on words. But then read into the associations in the industry in Canada and see how they talk. And then add that in to your meta tags as well. Because if the Canadian Media Producers Association uses specific terminology to describe what you do that is different from the way that the Colombian industry is describing what you do, obviously we want to take advantage of the Canadian content. Differentiation is important. stand out, use different words, expand the vocabulary, use dynamic words, use lots of different adjectives. Feel free to do that at the meta tag level and at the content level within the website, because then that feeds into the Google experience and then it's going to help you out. 3D animation, it's obviously a generic term. So if there's ways of augmenting that and then bringing it to your attention and you show up in the top 10, that's huge. Especially given how many, let's face it, how many companies in the world do 3D animation. If you can end up in the top 10, that's your goal. If you can beat out Canadian companies and end up in the top 10, then you're doing even better. Your website. So we're going to start talking about websites, and we're going to talk about best practices. And I'm wondering how this is going to come up. I may need to... There we go. No, it's the fact that it's on this screen, but it's not on that screen. So what we've done is that we've kind of gone out and selected a best practices example of each one of the industries that we saw coming into the room today. And hopefully it's going to fit. So for anybody in digital marketing that does anything from website development to email marketing to creative to branding, and logo creation or anything like that, I work with a company in Vancouver called Burst. All right, so could you scroll back down again? So Burst is a digital and creative design agency located in Vancouver, Canada. Boom. Center, logo, beautiful image of a Vancouver condo. Expensive, professional. Don't work with us unless you have lots of money. Burst. We've been busy. If you hover over that, portfolio, right? Right there and then. So if we scroll, then all of a sudden we're just getting into essentially standard website, text, 2 paragraphs, 1 paragraph, click, content, contact us. That's an example of a branding agency. Now, it's funny because branding agencies always seem to want to complicate things. They're the first ones that'll go, the clouds soaring overhead, bring us to a new age in discovery. What do? So these guys actually had discovered, painfully, that every time they tried to pitch these big Vancouver companies with the fluff, the Vancouver companies thought they were from New York on Fifth Avenue, or they thought they were from LA. And these guys have offices in these cities, but they actually turned around and said, we like Vancouver clients and customers because they like that local feel, and they wanted to expand the Vancouver office, and people love to live there because it's a gorgeous city. So Burst basically redid everything to be as direct and simple as possible, and that's the lead-in to the portfolio and the creative. So this is an example of how it works in Vancouver sometimes. Now, if you're a global international brand agency and you've got offices in Paris and things like that, you have a completely different view on life, and you're probably going to have a different front page on the website. But I love this example of how Burst figured out a way to get that value statement in 3 seconds and makes you want to click on that Learn More button right in the middle, right in your face. So, yeah. V51 Consulting. So anybody in the Microsoft platform implementation software services space. This is a company in Canada that is essentially integrating SharePoint and Office 365 into your enterprise. There are 1,600 of these companies in Canada that do this. There are 4,500, I think, or 5,000 in the United States that do this. Every single one of them is certified on Microsoft SharePoint. Every single one of them does email. They have to differentiate themselves. These guys came in and actually focused their message right down to just very clear and very precise, and then it goes almost straight into their clients. So when you click on clients, they start to describe the solutions that they've created rather than saying, we're an expert in SharePoint, we're an expert in Microsoft technology. Hey, we're really good at email. What they're doing is they're directing you image-wise and then into the client. So everything past this point funnels you into their success stories. And that's how they're winning. Because if they did it for Bank of Montreal, they can do it for you. So Squeeze. These guys are crazy. They're based out of Quebec City. They're one of the top animation companies in Canada. They have sold to all of the big boys, and they've participated in a couple of movies. The number 2 thing that they ask is reels. Their reels are incredibly sophisticated, and they've got a kind of a different reel per genre that they do, and they've worked on some of the biggest productions. I talked to this guy, and he's now a friend of mine on LinkedIn, and he's constantly sending me ideas and examples of how companies internationally can improve in order to sell to Squeeze and sell into the animation industry. And he says, I don't want good. He says, I don't want best. I want better than everybody else in the world. That's what I want. He says, I'm looking at your 3D. You're good, but you're not good enough. So that's an example of kind of how, for good or for bad, he's going to take a look at what you do, and he's going to look at your reel, and he's going to look at your capabilities, and he's going to go, yes, no. And in French, oui, non. And that's going to be the end of it. But the good news is, if he likes what he sees and he thinks that you can contribute even, 17 frames into a large movie production, Angry Birds or something to that effect, he's going to call you. He's a black and white sort of a guy, and it's these are the types of high-end animation studios in Canada that you'll be selling sub-services in a sense, so animation services, or you'll be selling clips that can be expanded into large TV productions. So I think he used to be on the board of directors at some of these animation and media associations of Canada, and he speaks at these types of events because he's the most blunt guy you'll ever meet, and he's just right into it. Takes about 5 minutes to do his speech, and it tells you exactly where he is and where the animation industry is as a whole. So we're going to show those other 2 portfolios later? Okay. All right. Social media. Let's talk about Twitter. Let's talk about Facebook. Let's talk about LinkedIn. The number 1 professional platform used by Canadian businesses is LinkedIn. That's where they expect to find information on you. That's where they want to know whether you went to school and what university you graduated from. And quite frankly, your CV is there on LinkedIn if they need to understand it. Where Canadian businesses do not go to find out information about you is Facebook. There are companies that do have Facebook pages, but you have to understand that Canadians are risk averse, and we don't like going to a Facebook page where suddenly we're seeing pictures of the party that your company had last Friday night where everybody got nice and pickled on down at the local pub. You have to understand that the way that you do Facebook, especially in Latin America, is everybody's relaxed, we're laid back. It's not a big deal. But in Canada, we're uptight about it. Most corporations will not have anything on a Facebook page other than what the marketing team puts up on that Facebook page. LinkedIn is where you're putting the professional profile. Twitter, if you don't have anything to talk about, there's nothing worse than seeing a Twitter feed with four tweets in it. Because then they're like, you guys specialize in this space, and then you're not even using it. You have to have something to talk about. I've always thought Twitter was for the movie stars and the famous people, or for companies that have something to say every 2 days. If you don't have that, now, Twitter is a fantastic resource for research because you're going to find out what the company's been doing, and you can read an awful lot about it. But the number 1 mistake we all make is we think we need to be in Twitter, and then they hit your website, and you've got 2 tweets in the last 14 months. Dead content that hasn't been updated. Nobody's bothered to pay attention to it. Hey, there's a blog entry from 2013. Great. Are they going to think you're modern and on the pulse of the needs of the Canadian industry if your last update on your blog was 4 years ago? No. In fact, it's the other way around. B-pile. Right? So Twitter is, you use it for very specific and very unique types of circumstances for messaging, but just be aware of the fact that it can look like you're just not on top of things. Yeah. Yeah. There are some companies that have very strict usage guides for Facebook where you're not allowed to talk about your company list where you work. But they are the minority. And the reason for that is the legal reason. Unfortunately, these companies can't tell you how to live your life. But you can be punished severely by doing something on Facebook that embarrasses the hell out of the company and then makes that company look like they're, and sometimes you can't avoid that, but just be aware of that. Facebook is for personal use in Canada. LinkedIn and Twitter and a few of the others are for professional use, and make sure they're constantly up to date. Let's talk about portfolio. So especially in the creative industry, this is going to be your CV. This is what you're going to use to sell, and it's going to have to be fast. They're not going to spend 15 minutes going through everything. They're going to want click, click, where, click, click, where, okay, that looks fantastic. I need to talk to these guys, which is horrible that we have a one-page, kind of printed flyer to talk about how creative you are in the animation industry, but that's just life. So let's talk a few things about portfolio best practices. Select your best work, the one stuff that's most dynamic, because that one is what's getting attention. It's not necessarily explaining what you do, it's just getting attention. Try to lead with something that you won an award with, or something that you did really well with and people absolutely loved it. Definitely choose more than 5 samples. If you do a reel, try to remember that they don't have that much time to go through the reel. Make sure that it doesn't autoplay and auto volume because there's nothing worse than starting the reel and then I can't stop it and it's pounding through the speakers and I'm like, ugh! Don't do that. Make sure that you're using a technology that allows for full control over everything from volume, and even ask them, says, would you like to set the volume before it actually plays? Think about that from he's in an office with 20 other people around him at a small desk and that thing starts firing off at full volume over the speakers. It should reflect the core strengths and keep it updated and fresh. Come up with a new reel every 6 months, stuff that's new, add it in. Make sure that you're doing that. So other things in the portfolio that you're going to want to try is customer testimonials. In the creative, that's more of here's a TV show I created, an example. But remember that Canadian companies may not have seen or even be aware of a lot of the programs, TV shows, documentaries, or any content that's coming out of Latin America. So sometimes it's nice to list what this thing is. Tiny little faded description that says 52 episode documentary done in Colombia. That's good because they're seeing this high quality work, but they're also understanding the context in the market that it came out of. And that's perfectly valid, especially if you don't necessarily have some that might have been sold into the US or Canadian markets already. So try to help them along in understanding what it is that they're looking at, but do it in a way that doesn't add 10 minutes to the overall profile itself. Have this on your website. Have it on a phone. Have it capable of being easy to show. But then there's a couple of other examples of where you can do this, especially in the creative industry. You can have a standalone reel or a kind of a storyboarding for a tablet or for a computer that doesn't require internet access, which sometimes happens in Canada, as crazy as that sounds. And you can show exactly what it is that you do on a moment's notice without having to log into something or forcing them to go to the website. So be creative at how you're showing the reels and your portfolio outside of a website experience. Make sure that you've got the capability to bring that thing up in 3 clicks so that you can show somebody with a beer in their hands exactly what you do. Oh, this is what we do, right? You want to get to that point because especially if we're going to end up in Toronto and we're going to an event, that's the perfect place to visually show, but you can't take up more than 1.5 minutes or 2 minutes of their time because it's kind of a networking opportunity and walking around and having drinks. So I'm going to show, we're going to show some examples of, is it the reels or it's actually the portfolios themselves? Sure.
Okay, I've selected 2 portfolios, and they're both from Canadian companies, so this will give you an idea of your competition in the market. This is a design and digital studio. Sorry. Now, what I liked about it is that they identified the problem that they were trying to solve for the customer, so that the customer could recognize themselves in the challenge. They list right at the start the awards that this campaign has won or what they've done. There was a web design project, a web development project, and they've listed the 2 awards that this project has won. They show clearly examples of the website that they've developed. And they explain their solution. So the first part had the problem that they were trying to solve for the customer, and then they explain the solution that they provided to the customer. Oops. Some more pictures of the website. And then what I thought was cool too is they included a testimonial from the client, and they also included the impact. Up there is the impact, sorry. They included the impact that the website has had. And they list again the awards. Now, the reason why I like that is I've seen a lot of a lot of portfolios, and they kind of don't have any context around them. They may look really cool and be really amazing, but I don't know what the customer asked. I'm not sure how well they were able to respond. I like that this one has context. That's a Canadian company. Here's another Canadian company. I'll just go over it quickly. It's basically the same kind of concept. Right, so you'll see right away they have the awards that they've listed, the awards on the side of that page. And this is the one we're going to go look at, Ducks Unlimited. So this is the challenge that they were trying to solve on behalf of their client. This is the website that they were creating for their client, how it looks on the mobile. What they did specifically. And this is the description of the solution they provided for the client based on the client's challenge. And that's that. I'll turn you back to Greg to talk about the reels.
Right. So essentially, at least if you're in the digital marketing space, this is your competition. This is kind of what you're going head to head against if you're trying to sell to a business or an end client. As part of our work with you, partnering with a company like that might be another option rather than necessarily trying to compete directly. But it shows you the level of the standard of content that is typically being put out in a web and mobile view by somebody in the digital marketing industry in Canada, and the types of companies. And these companies aren't necessarily more than 10 or 15 people. It might be 20 or 25 people. They're not massive. They're just extremely capable of visually showing content on the website that is effective at getting your attention and making you want to actually click through and double check, look at these clients. And then when they get in there, you've got a client that is so well recognized in Canada. Ducks Unlimited is very well recognized in Canada. And it's pages and pages of commentary on how fantastic this website was, and then the feedback from the client. That's extremely compelling because Canadians like trust in our relationship development. And when they see that, it impresses them. It's obviously good work done with a client, and the client is bragging about this, taking up 7 or 8 pages on a website to talk about how great a job this company did. How's it cool? Love these guys. So demo reels. Yeah, let's run this one. Have we got sound?
I hope so. It's a fun song. It's a French song.
Do you want to take a look?
Des cornichons, des cornets de bif et des biscottes, des macarons, un tire-bouchon.
We don't really need to show the whole thing, but one of the reasons I suggested that we look at House of Cool, and some of you that were in the mission to Toronto in November, you would have met Wes Liu, who's the CEO of House of Cool. And quite obviously, they do most of their business in Hollywood. And almost all of their business is not co-production, it's all services. So the really cool thing that I liked about their reel is that not only are there very identifiable customers, clients in here, from DreamWorks, Despicable Me, to Martin Scorsese's Hugo movie. So it's really good brand recognition, right? So it's almost a reel full of client testimonial, right? And the other thing is, the way they've structured it is they've showed that we didn't do all of Despicable Me, we didn't do all of Hugo. Here is the specific thing that they asked us to do. They asked us to do the spaceship scene in Despicable Me. Here's how we storyboard it, animated it. Here's how it fit into it. So they're basically telling you, we don't really focus on co-production. We don't really do our own full-length features. We're all services-based animation. So it tells you a lot about their business as well as demonstrating their capability. So just wanted to say that. Well, yeah. Brown Bag, I don't really need to say too much about it. Is that they're also a very high-profile subsidiary of a larger production company in Canada, and they're just a really good real example. So if you want to show a little bit of it, go ahead. Show it.
So you can see that the need for something that's dynamic and colorful and fun, and it's going to get the attention. You'll also note how easy it was to find the demo reel right off of the front page within 7 seconds. Click. The thing came up. It gave you options to control the volume and the play, and then it included everything from being able to film a live location all the way through to, of course, examples of the animation that they do. So that kind of just gives the impression of the types of services that they're capable of. Obviously, the majority was animation, but they actually do quite a few other things and other types of services. So in the creative side, this is the number one tool that you're going to use. I know that a lot of companies already have that. It's okay to have Spanish content or animation that might have Spanish words in it, but obviously if you can make it as generic as possible for any market, then that's what we want to get to in the end goal, is to make sure that overview is capable of showing to an international country international content that could then be used in other particular productions and sold outside of Canada, because animation is the number one sellable content that a Canadian company can put out into an international market, because it's as simple as a basic translation. It's not like we actually have to change the view of Vancouver and now we have to find a view of a jungle or a view of a desert. The animation itself is global when you're making that type of an animation. Right. So as we saw, the testimonials, if you don't have any, you need to get some, but that's just good for your business as a whole. That's not just a Canadian thing. Canadians, they like those because there's a trust factor. It doesn't really matter if the testimonial is from a client here in Colombia, but I would translate what the client said for obvious reasons. They need to be able to see what the client said to you. Testimonials, though, allow for comparison. So first off, you're legitimate. You're a company that's done business, especially if you've done business with a company in the United States. You are being seen as value add to a company that they could do separate research on and actually find that company and understand a little bit more, and they can identify with that client. That's number one here is that if you've already done something for an animation company in the US where you supplied a single set of frames in a specific way, then they will be able to see that the client said they did this, they came in, they did that, it worked, we won an Academy Award, these guys are great. That client will immediately identify with that particular testimonial and see himself or herself in that particular role. And that's a fantastic way to sell, because if they can already see themselves as one of your customers, then the next step is really just closing the deal, right? You want to have enough biographical information. You're going to want to make sure that you've translated any of the quotes. Anything that kind of adds to that. Video testimonials are good. Just make them short and sweet. Sometimes it's very difficult to do that because now we're into something outside of what you normally do, which is setting up a film shoot for a customer who then has to worry about what they look like and things like that. But if you can get away with that, what an amazing opportunity you have to actually have your customer in a video next to your demo reel saying how fantastic you are. Not the easiest thing in the world to do. Rarely been able to kind of get it going, but larger companies tend to be able to do things like that. Oh, absolutely. So there's a couple of ways to go about that. The first thing is right from the beginning. Sometimes it's good to understand that they will be asked for testimonials if I do a good job. So I write that into proposals. You know, we reserve the right, with your permission, you know, to come back and ask for references, testimonials, and content. So they're already expecting it. From there, of course, you have to do a good job. Make sure that the customer and client is happy, happy, happy. And then you come back saying, remember when I told you I was going to ask you about references? I'm going to ask you for a reference. Let the client decide what they're comfortable with. You can't force them to ever do something that's way outside their comfort zone. They'll either say, you can describe me, but don't list my company. You can describe me and you list my company and my website. I love those from Creative because they're taking you straight through to the website. But remember, if the website changes, the link has to change and you have to update things like that. And then all the way through to, yeah, in fact, I'd love to speak at a conference about the solution that you did for me. That's awesome. Let's get them lined up. Volunteer within your associations. If your association has an annual conference, say, hey, I've got a happy client that's willing to get up on stage and talk for 30 minutes about how this solution in this industry or this sector helped me. That's awesome. All the way through to, hey, you want to do a movie? You know, want to be a superstar? But again, you have to let the client dictate what their comfort levels are. A lot of them won't go any further than just saying, yeah, you did a great job. Simple quote, name of company. They may want to hide their last name, so they just go Greg H. rather than the full name. That's the type of stuff that you want to get out of every single positive client experience, because that brings trust and credibility faster than almost anything else. Doesn't matter how good your demo reel is. If you got a client, especially one in Canada, saying that you helped them out quite a bit and it was success, that's going to have much more of an impact. And that's why a portfolio is so important and why it's so critical to have a rich, updated, constantly updated portfolio of your most recent work, successful work, and have clients saying that you're doing a fantastic job. So I'm a writer in a sense, and I do creative writing. So I don't necessarily even name the sector. So I have a client that's very nervous about being anywhere on the internet. And so I said we had a client that was interested in achieving, you know, a tripling of revenue through their website. We ended up increasing their website statistics by 627%, resulting in revenue increase of 22%. We're not even talking about the sector. Now, is that good compared to, you know, my client, the CEO, going, I love this guy. Greg's awesome. This is great. Of course not. But I'm allowed to do that because I'm not identifying anybody. I'm not publicly saying that what the name of the company was. I'm not even describing what sector they're in. But yeah, it's very generic, and some people will see that as fluff. Yeah, we'll talk a bit this afternoon about, you know, how you negotiate contracts that allow you to use imagery but to control under what conditions that is used, which is usually self-promotion. What they're usually worried about is you're going to embarrass them, or you're going to make money off of it, which stops them from making money off of it. Most clients will be open-minded to the idea that the fact that you made something, that's good. But if the bigger the movie studio and the bigger the show and the more lawyers involved at the top of that movie studio, the harder it is to reuse content. We'll get into that this afternoon, but essentially you have to find a good way to negotiate that into the initial contracts that you're signing. And that's hard because, especially if you're just doing a small piece of work for a very large project. But you have the right to kind of ask for that. Don't ever be afraid to ask for it. Worst case scenarios, they say no for these reasons. And then you understand why they said no. And if you can overcome that, you can do it. All right, so just to close this out, best practices. I'm saying this to people that develop websites, so I'm sorry if it sounds obvious. 3 clicks to anything on the website. If they cannot press a buy button or contact you button immediately off of anywhere on the website, then you failed, because the purpose of the website is to get them to contact you, right? We're selling. We want them to contact us. The contact us is always accessible. Figure it out. There's so many technologies we can use, so many different ways to do that. Can I email you my demo reel? It brings them to a hosted site somewhere in Canada. There's lots of different ways to do it. Just make sure that it can be done straight off of the page. Responsive web presence. I give an absolute failing grade to anybody that has a pop-up chat box, which by the way are sometimes very annoying, and nobody's there. Why do you have a pop-up box that pretends that you have 24-hour service and that somebody's going to respond to you immediately and then not have somebody manning that? That's similar to the Twitter conversation. If you can't give it 100%, don't bother doing it. Let's talk a little bit about Canadians. We expect an immediate answer, which of course you can't do, and yet we still expect it. The reality is that the more prompt you are and the more effective you are at quickly responding, even if it's we'll get back to you by the end of the day, something that gives them an indication. If you give nothing and then you don't respond, you don't just go in the B category, you go straight out the door into the trash. That's bad practice. Canadian companies expect responsiveness, and they expect, even if the response is, I'll get back to you next Friday. At least it tells them a time frame, although that's not as good as, hi, what do you want? But we all know that, as much as you're in the same time zone, we all work differently. We're all doing different things. Just make sure that you're responsive, especially if a Canadian company is contacting you either by email or they're clicking on your form on the website. Because that's just bad practice to have that form take 3 days in order to get to one of the sales guys. And by then it's dead because he's already talked to 2 of your competitors. And he's probably gotten a response from a Canadian competitor because the Canadian competitor put it back in an hour. Probably with a proposal and a click on a demo reel. No error pages. You people do programming, you do coding, you do movies that go from start to finish. Make sure that the experience is not interrupted by something ridiculously goofy like an error page or a 404 page, or there's no link, or they click on a link and it's dead. They click on a link and the page is no longer there. You people are in the ICT and creative industries. Canadians are going to expect that not only are you well out ahead on this, but you're really, really good at it, that you're perfect at it. All right? A North American number is very useful. Make sure it's answered. It doesn't have to be a live voice. Put the +1. Make sure that they understand how to dial into Colombia. Don't just put a Colombian number. Obviously, don't just put 0 and then the Colombian number, because that's just a nightmare. We don't know what the country code is for Colombia. Nobody will know. So you need to give them very clear, very precise, big font. How do we contact you? Obviously, you want them to click on the forms or the emails, but fundamentally, if there's a phone number there, make sure you're on top of that. And then make sure you get back to them in 24 hours or even less. Faster is better. That's a very good question. Your address. Best practices. I've gone back and forth on this a couple of times. I've had these digital marketing guys in Vancouver say, we're global, man. We're just in the cloud. Doesn't matter. That's not the right answer, because we want to know where you're from. We want to know how to get a hold of you. We want to know that you're real. In fact, I don't do businesses with anybody that doesn't give me an address, because I don't know where they are, and I can't even figure out whether they're a Canadian company or not, and can I even trust them? And now I'm going into if they're from Asia or from Ukraine, and My imagination's going nuts, thinking about how these guys are going to hack my systems and steal all my money by the time I'm done my imaginary run. The reality is, it's okay to say you're from Colombia, because you've already pitched them a value statement that gets them interested. You've already told them what it is you do and the value that you have, and the reason that they're scrolling down to find where you are is because they're interested in who you are. It's okay. Maybe you don't put that right up front. Said Colombia, and then a flag's waving, and then it takes you 10 minutes to get to a value statement. But I've always felt, and a lot of people feel, and Canadians feel on the whole, that trying to hide where you're from and making it really, really hard to figure that out, it makes me suspect you. It makes me wonder what you're all about and what you're hiding. You're ashamed? You don't even have an office? If you're working out of a home office, okay, you put your P.O. box, but at least it tells them where you're from and what location you're in. But by then, they've already decided that they want to learn more about you. So there's no harm in that. I definitely think you should put in the address. Just make sure that it doesn't take up a lot of real estate and it's easy to understand. Remember that we don't know what piso means. We don't understand what, calle and carrera and all of these types of things are, if you feel that you can make those changes easily. If that is the address and you need it to be that way, that's fine. No problem. Yeah, virtual addresses are hard. And again, all I'm saying is that Canadians that don't see an actual location where they either have a telephone number or they know you are located in this area will think that you're hiding something. And then that becomes a little suspected. At the end of the day, if the value statement and your portfolio and the types of clients you have are so phenomenally right in their wheelhouse, they probably don't care. But it will help. It will help with trust, and it will help with credibility, because they'll at least know exactly where you are and who they're dealing with, what country you're in, and even want to learn more about culture and Colombia and how you guys do business. And wow, you're doing business in Canada. That's pretty impressive. So I think it's a benefit to make sure that you do it. You just have to do it in a way that's nice and clear, clean and simple. So I think we've covered off on pretty much all of this. Have we got going into lunch? Okay, so we have 10 minutes. All right, so obviously, as we get into the coaching and as we start going through what is the best way to communicate with these Canadian clients that you want to get, we're going to keep coming back to this over and over and over again. What this was for is to get you thinking today about maybe some of the things that you might have to start putting in practice, because it takes you a month and a half to make any changes to your website. Get on it tomorrow. Let's not do this in March and be trying to scramble and pull together something that suddenly we have to slap up, because some of this stuff will actually take time. All right?
Thank you. If these are on your table, can you pass them to your row, please? And then let me know if you don't have one of them. Does everybody have one? Okay, good. So this is the website assessment. And as I mentioned earlier today, the first priority is a company profile. But then another priority is a website assessment. Now, to get into this course, Greg and Theo reviewed your websites using this assessment, basically, to assess if you were even ready to come to the training. We picked the 27 most qualified companies to come to the training. Because, for example, if you didn't have a website, then you are too far from being ready to go to Canada in a few months, right? The trainers, as I think I mentioned yesterday, I'm not sure if you were there, but the trainers will also be conducting an assessment of your website. They're going to be using this tool to look at your website and provide comments. We also want you to do a self-assessment of your website to kind of identify maybe any challenges you might be having before the trainers get to it, before Greg and Theo relook and provide more concrete evidence or concrete comments, about your website, right? So there's two main sections. And the first section here, part 1, it deals with content, website content. And this you might want to get your marketing manager to look at, or the CEO, or to look at the content of the website. And it's about messaging, things that Greg and Theo have been talking about all morning, about messaging and so forth. Now the second page over here, this is about technical elements of your website. And if you didn't design your website yourself, you might want to get your web developer to look at this section, or look at it and then provide your feedback to the web developer to make sure that the technical elements of the website have been addressed. Now, really, it's kind of a yes/no exercise, not incredibly complicated. But if there's a no, if you put no, then you should write over here a comment of how you're going to address that. Or if it says yes but needs improvement, write a comment of how you intend on addressing that, so that your website at the end of this exercise and before anybody goes to Canada is world class, right? So just take a look at this, flip through it now. I mean, we're going to go to lunch now, but flip through this exercise over the break and read it and start thinking about your website. Don't forget that the profile is the first priority, and then this can be done second afterwards. Did everybody get one? And all the trainers got one as well? Okay. Do you want to talk about this? Anything else?
Yeah. Just to quickly follow on, yes, Theo and I went through your websites in detail, and we know what we liked. We know what might have been required to work on. And then if you're in this room, it means that you're well along. We're not trying to be mean. We're not trying to be cruel in any way, shape, or form. But we are saying that at your present state, you are capable of coming into the Canadian market with a website where people would look at it and say, I get it. I understand it. I understand what you do. But that's a big step from understanding and being able to get the basic content to buy from you. Wow, get it done. Value statement, which is why we're doing all of the things that we're doing today. So this is helpful, I think, more so that you'll understand what the next conversation is going to be if you haven't made any changes, right? Because Theo and I are going to get on the phone with you as coaches and say, so page 2, there's an error message. Hello. And those will be the types of things that we want you, I think yourselves, you can clean these up. The value statement and changing content and text and things like that, well, it takes a bit more work. And we certainly want to work on that constantly and refreshing. What we want you to start on today is the stuff that does take a lot of work to actually change and alter. Like if you had to alter a demo reel because it was completely in Spanish, you might as well get on that now, because that's actually not as easy as just altering a couple of words on an English website, right? So this tool will actually give you a very good idea as to what we're looking at and kind of where we want you to focus. And then we'll also clarify at the end of it, what we want is to make sure that this entire thing has nothing but green, dots at the end of it. Or we've said to you, you know what, that doesn't matter, don't worry about it, so that it doesn't cost you a lot of money to have to change something that, quite frankly, you're probably not going to need. All right? So do spend the time to actually go through the assessment, if anything, just to learn about what we're going to ask you to do anyway in the next month or month and a half. So just to summarize before we go to lunch, you're going to use the web as pretty much your primary selling tool. And you're going to use the most obvious tools, which is website, mobile development, and then various different types of content that are going to get people's attention. If you're in the creative industry, the reel and your portfolio are very, very critical. If you're in the software development industry or digital marketing, client testimonials are huge, because that helps skip over the, I do .NET programming and I do it really well, but I help this client do this, this, and that, and he loves me and he brags about me, gets you in the door. We're going to definitely try to look at other tools that may help augment this, but fundamentally that's going to be the core. We told you what to do with your websites, best practices, tried to give you an indication of what not to do, especially with Canadian clients, and take the opportunity to kind of go through how you do your marketing and the communication tools you use, and obviously your website. Use the website assessment to kind of run through and make sure that you're using best practices. And if you're not, let's start working on that today, because that is going to be something that we need to clean up in the next 4 to 6 weeks to make sure that that first glimpse by these companies, if we can start setting up meetings and Skype and these types of things well before anybody comes to Canada, that's a great opportunity. Skype session, learn more about you. That's not a bad thing. It actually starts the ball rolling a lot earlier. But if the first thing they're going to do is check your website and it hasn't had the updates that we're asking you to do, then that's going to slow us down. And in fact, it may stop us in our tracks depending on what the client sees or doesn't see. All right. So obviously, if you have any questions or stuff about that, Theo and I eat this stuff for breakfast day and night. So definitely ask us, because this is one of my favorite topics and I do like talking about it. All right.
Bueno, entonces les vamos a pedir que por favor, lo mismo ayer, se salgan del salón unos 5 o 10 minutos mientras lo arreglamos para el almuerzo. Y otro favor muy importante para todas las empresas de las regiones, necesitamos que por favor guarden sus pases de abordar. Si tienen los del lunes, espero que sí, se lo envíen a sus asesores regionales de ProColombia. Y si no lo tienen, igual tenemos una carta que deben firmar diciendo que sí tomaron el vuelo que les compramos. Y lo mismo entonces los que se regresan hoy, que por favor guarden sus pases de abordar porque debemos presentarlo al gobierno canadiense. Entonces, por favor, 5 o 10 minutos y ya los hacemos entrar. Gracias.